There's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez of New York, Ilhan Omar from Minnesota, Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts, and Rashida Tlaib from Michigan. The tweets seemingly in response to their criticism on the president. Only Omar was born outside the US. She was the first Somali American to be elected to the House. What do you make of this, Thomas? This is quite an attack. Can you imagine any other leader around the world telling his opposition to go back to where you came from?
No, but it just doesn't surprise me. I mean, this is a terrible thing, right? Because we've become almost immune to these increasingly extraordinary attacks and claims from Trump. And he wants, to be frank, he wants the outrage. He wants the people to claim offence, as they should, by the way, because it's incredibly offensive what he says. But it's his playbook. He says these offensive things. He says these inflammatory things.
How far can you go?
Well, I think he's going to keep on pushing because it works for him. It's a diversionary tactic. More often than not, it's, you can almost set your clock by it. If something bad is going on in Trump land, he'll come out and say something incredibly inflammatory. And by the way, I mean, it's not just Trump. I mean, potentially the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was recently wrote a column comparing women wearing burqas to letterboxes. It's exactly the same playbook. Let's say something inflammatory. I'll get attacked by, sort of liberals. I can then back to my conservative base. It's bad that I struggle to get too outraged about it now, just because it just seems
I'm going to put it right out there. New York Times op piece, Emma suggested, and I think said, Donald Trump was a raging racist. Yep. Is he?
Yeah, I'm the same as Thomas. I've just saturated my outrage capacity, and it does what it says on the tin. This is who he is.
Yeah.
And I've moved on to being outraged about Justin Trudeau.
Right.
Well, you've got this, this villain, and so it's so easy to be outraged about Trump. And actually, he's not the only person in the world doing stuff.
Quoting this piece, there can be no more discussion or debate about whether or not Trump is a racist. There can be no more rhetorical juggling about not knowing what's in his heart. White people and whiteness are the centre of the Trump presidency. His primary concern is to defend, protect and promote it.
He would love that. The media is his enemy. He would absolutely love that.
And he'll probably quote that to his base, and he's out campaigning in blue working class areas, blue collar, talking to angry, unemployed white people. He'll say, hey, I'm standing up for you.
Let me tell you this right now. Why we brought it up on the panel is because I will get responses right now, texts and emails, supporting Trump to the full.
Really? Yeah.
And we've got them right now. They're coming through right now. So what would you say to that?
Can you take down their email address?
Obviously, there's
I mean, look, and that's, it's a free country. People can hold the opinions that they hold.
See, it's not a racist attack from Trump. It's a political attack.
Well, it can be both, right?
Yeah. And I guess what I want to say is I think if Trump suddenly decided next term that it was in his interest to come out and defend African Americans, I think he would do it, actually.
Yeah,
because I think he's shameless. I think he's racist. He objectively is racist, but I think he's saying it because it suits him politically as well. So if he felt it suited him politically to all of a sudden come out and defend ethnic minorities, I think he'd probably do that as well.
Do you kind of agree with what Emma's saying in terms of, because there's a lot of people that have reached their saturation level with being a little bit over what he's saying. It's kind of, let's move on to some other...
100%. But also because it is part of his mythology. It's outraging people, so I'm just not going to play into that anymore.
I mean, what he wants is oxygen. Best thing to do is deprive him of it.
Very good indeed. You have been with the panel this afternoon, a big response to all our topics, and a big thank you to Thomas Pryor and Emma Espiner and to Ella Ventura for putting the show together. Thanks, folks. I'm back tomorrow. Thank you.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Tonight, did we lose or were we robbed? It's just not cricket or a World Cup without a post-match dissection of epic proportions. The water cooler clashes, tears and tantrums, the what-ifs, buts and maybes. Unlike the result, we won't disappoint. Are your clothes being made by Muslim Uyghur slaves forced to churn out high street clothing brands? The government invests in 100% recyclable plastic food packaging. And it's not an animated movie, but it could be. The little blue penguins stuck between a railway station, a 5-lane road, barbed wire fence and the ocean. We bring you the case of the colossal Canterbury cactus. That's got really prickly. And doth he protest too much about the Auckland mayoralty? John Banks, that is. Methinks it's time for the news.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. Cricket fans in Auckland seem to be taking the World Cup loss in their stride. On the streets today, people RNZ spoke to said the loss was disappointing, but being involved in possibly one of the greatest games of all time was reward in itself. One fan says the Black Caps played their hearts out and they should be proud of themselves. But he says maybe the ICC should take a look at the controversial tie-breaking rule that gave England the win with an equal number of runs all up.
You know, everyone knew what the rules were, so they're all playing to the same rules. But I kind of would like to think that there was a better system for sort of finding a winner if it was a draw, and it was like a double draw. But, totally proud. Amazing. Those guys are amazing.
An Auckland cricket fan. The Crown says a man whose body was found at McLaren Falls in Bay of Plenty last year died after being held in a chokehold in the back of a car. Leon Wilson and Christopher Smith are on trial in the High Court at Hamilton, charged with manslaughter and the kidnapping of Mitchell Patterson in July last year. The prosecutor, Jacinda Foster, says while there was no intention to kill the 26-year-old, he died in Hamilton after being restrained.
The Crown says that Mr Smith and Mr Wilson, by reason of their actions and their involvement in the early hours of the 12th of July, are parties to the assault. And as parties to the assault, they are parties to the manslaughter.
A third person, Chloe Kerridge, faces charges that include kidnapping. 5 other people have pleaded guilty to various charges relating to Mr Patterson's death. An overseas investment company has been fined and ordered to pay costs totalling more than $500,000 for buying sensitive land without approval. BCH Investments had bought the 5 hectares of land in Auckland next to a reserve for almost $13 million in 2013. Sarah Robson has more.
The High Court has ordered BCH to pay the maximum penalty of $300,000, along with $288,000 in costs for buying the land without permission from the Overseas Investment Office. BCH must also sell the properties in Albany within 2 years. The company had planned to develop the land into residential sections for sale. That work was already underway when the Overseas Investment Office discovered the breaches in 2014. Justice Powell said given the size, scope and nature of the development proposed, BCH should have looked into the rules. Ko Sarah Robson, aho.
The police are investigating injuries to a 6-month-old baby admitted to Nelson Hospital on Friday. Acting Detective Sergeant Robin Green says the child was taken to hospital with burns and later transferred to the Hutt Hospital Burns Unit. Ms Green says they're treating the injuries as non-accidental. She's asking anyone with information to contact the Nelson Child Protection Team on 03 546 3840. The man accused of murdering 43-year-old Kieran Payne after a fight in Taihape at the weekend has been named. 23-year-old Te Ao Hakopa appeared in the Whanganui District Court this afternoon. Lee Marama McLaughlin reports.
Te Ao Hakopa is facing charges of murder, grievous bodily harm and intent to cause grievous bodily harm. It comes after a fight in the early hours of Saturday morning. Police say the assault happened on Thrush Street. Te Ao Hakopa wore a black t-shirt and blue jeans when he appeared before Judge Philip Creighton this afternoon. His family members cried out to him and wept as he was leaving the dock. The accused will reappear in the High Court in Whanganui early next month. In Whanganui, I'm Lee Marama McLaughlin.
The Associate Environment Minister Eugenie Sage says people need to think harder about recycling. The government today announced it's investing $3 million to create the country's first 100% recycling plastic food packaging range in Auckland. The Pact Group plant will be able to recycle plastic from 10 common product lines, including meat and bakery trays. Ms Sage says to date the New Zealand economy has been a take, make and dispose model, but the time has come to move to a more efficient waste management economy.
Getting the right materials in the crate is absolutely critical, and keeping glass out of the material stream is also critical. There are some issues with that here in Auckland, but keeping material streams separate and keeping them clean is really important. So yes, people need to do better. One thing people can do to help is ensuring that their containers are clean when they put them in the curbside bin.
Eugenie Sage. Little blue penguins believed to be sheltering under a Wellington CBD sushi bar could face a perilous journey across peak hour traffic lanes unless the Department of Conservation decides to move them. The pair of korora, considered to be at risk and declining, were spotted at dawn outside the Wellington railway station and took refuge under the sushi bar. Winnie Morris, who works there, says she thinks they are hiding underneath near the grills where it will be nice and warm.
It's pretty insane, the idea that some penguins are camping out under your shop. But it's adorable, I think. They're probably terrified, but it's adorable.
And we've just heard the police have removed the penguins. It's coming up to 5:05. The England cricket captain, Owen Morgan, has sympathy for New Zealand after the hosts won a nail-biting final at Lord's, but says everyone knew the rules before the World Cup started. In what's been described as the greatest one-day game ever played, it was tied not once but twice in both the regular 50-over match and super over. The match was then awarded to the team hitting the most boundaries. Morgan says he has huge respect for the Black Caps.
The most admirable thing is the way that they play their cricket. They consistently perform and compete against the very best, and at different stages throughout the year they are the best, and they do it in a fashion that you'd have no qualms in turning around to your kid and saying, please idolise these guys, they are admirable.
Owen Morgan. Injury is holding Scott Dixon back in his pursuit of back-to-back IndyCar titles. He's finished second in this morning's race in Toronto to remain fourth in the championship, but he's 86 points behind the series leader. Dixon says he's been bothered by tennis elbow for the best part of a month and won't be able to get it fixed until after the season.
You know, we're trying to do the best that we can right now with therapy to kind of maintain it, but races like today and Road America actually was really tough, so maybe it is getting a little bit better between this period, but, you know, definitely my left arm is just really weak right at the minute.
Scott Dixon. The Black Ferns have retained their number one world ranking in women's rugby after beating England 28-13 in the deciding game of the Super Series in San Diego. That's the news.
The ecstasy.
He's got it! England have won the World Cup by the barest of margins! Absolute ecstasy for England! Agony for New Zealand!
The agony.
Like I say, it's pretty tough to nitpick, except for the fact that perhaps it just wasn't meant to be for us.
And the denial.
Any side could have won. Arguably we did win. You know, the rules, but the rules are the rules.
Playing by the rules. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air, online and on Facebook.
Then on 9 to noon, the UK medicinal cannabis expert who wants New Zealand doctors to upskill and be ready to prescribe medical cannabis. And after 10, essential brain rules for living and ageing well with developmental molecular biologist John Medina. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Mainly fine with isolated showers tonight, rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms tomorrow morning and afternoon, followed by showers in the west, but becoming fine elsewhere. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine tonight, a period of afternoon or evening rain tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington, including Wairarapa, mainly fine with isolated showers. Morning rain tomorrow, possibly heavy, then mainly fine from the afternoon. For Marlborough and Nelson, rain developing this evening, sometimes heavy or thundery, clearing tomorrow morning early, but returning at night. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms at times. Canterbury, fine with variable high cloud. Otago and Southland, rain developing with snow down to 600 metres tonight. Becoming fine early tomorrow, but showers are likely about the south coast. And Chatham Islands, a few showers tonight and rain tomorrow night. You're with RNZ National. Indira Stewart is back at 5 a.m. tomorrow with First Up. It's now 6 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Susanna. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. What if a long list of questions, starting with those two words, have consumed Black Cap fans since the team's quest to lift the Cricket World Cup trophy came up agonisingly short against England in London this morning. The hosts were crowned champions after the final at the famous Lord's Ground concluded in tense and dramatic fashion. That is an understatement. The teams scored the same total from their full 50 overs and from what were expected to be match-deciding super overs overs, where each team has 6 extra balls to score as many runs as possible. In the end, England claimed the trophy because they hit more boundaries than New Zealand. As Clay Wilson reports, it was one of many talking points from what's being described as one of cricket's greatest ever matches.
Guptill's going to push for 2. They've got to go. It's got throw's got to go to the keeper's end. He's got it. England have won the World Cup by the barest of margins. Absolute ecstasy for England. Agony for New Zealand.
A dramatic moment to end a World Cup final, which came to a close with several of them. Black Caps batsman Martin Guptill run out, coming back for a second run, which would have given his team the title. Instead, it was England, not New Zealand, claiming their first World Cup crown, based on a countback of total boundaries after the two teams both scored 241 from their 50 overs and 15 each in the super overs that followed. Some former international players and prominent names in cricket have heavily criticised using boundaries as the deciding factor. Black Caps captain Kane Williamson conceded it wasn't easy coming to terms with.
While the emotions are raw, it is pretty hard to swallow when 2 attempts to separate with a winner and a loser still didn't perhaps sort of shine with one side coming through. It just is what it is, really. The rules are there at the start. No one probably thought that we'd have to resort to some of that stuff, but yeah, very tough to swallow.
After coming out on the right side of the countback at the home of cricket, England captain Owen Morgan said the match had to be decided somehow.
If you could give me an alternative, I'd be able to compare the both, but I can't think of an alternative at the moment. The rules were obviously set out a long time ago, and we have no control over them.
There was also no control for New Zealand when it came to a moment which helped England snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. After battling their way to what appeared a modest 241 against a power-packed English batting lineup, New Zealand's accurate bowling and fight in the field again came to the fore. And after breaking a 110-run partnership between Ben Stokes and Jos Buttler, the Black Caps were on track for the upset, with the home side needing 9 from 3 balls with just 2 wickets in hand. But when Stokes dove to make his ground and his outstretched bat inadvertently deflected the ball to the boundary for 4 bonus runs, England were able to force the final to a super over scenario and ultimately prevail. Williamson, though, wasn't dwelling on that moment alone.
You can't look at that and think that perhaps that decided the match. There were so many other bits and pieces to that game that were so important. When it comes down to a tie, you start looking at every single delivery, don't you? But it was a pretty tough pill to swallow when we were looking pretty likely with Trent bowling really, really well. So one of those things.
Just 1 ball later, Stokes found fortune again, as Trent Boult took a catch inches from the boundary, only to step on the rope a split second before being able to throw the ball to Guptill. When the super overs ensued, the equation of 16 to win proved just out of the Black Caps' reach. Coach Gary Stead felt, in the end, that maybe it just wasn't meant to be for his team.
I guess the hard thing is we played 2 games today. We had a super over as well. We didn't lose either of them. We bowled them out as well, and you still don't win the game. And unfortunately, that's sport, but maybe it was just England needed it more than us today.
Although ecstatic, Morgan admitted they got the rub of the green when it mattered. The England captain said he did feel some empathy for New Zealand.
The most admirable thing is the way that they play their cricket. They consistently perform and compete against the very best, and they do it in a fashion that you'd have no qualms in turning around to your kid and saying, please idolise these guys, they are admirable.
That kind of sentiment couldn't dull the impact of a devastating outcome for Williamson and his team. But after coming within a few feet of glory, after qualifying for the semi-finals in the 4th and final spot, it didn't mean the Black Caps captain wasn't able to put their campaign in context.
The thing you walk away with is the amount of heart and the amount of fight that the guys have shown throughout this whole campaign, but none more than the match that we've just witnessed, and both sides showed that today, and it did come down to, I don't know how they won it, what was it, boundaries or something, but it was someone had to walk away with the title, and we're gutted that it's not us.
A place in cricketing folklore, albeit on the wrong side. Moti hotaka o tia hipo nei, ko Clay Wilson aho.
Are you among those feeling a little foggy this evening? Yeah, wouldn't surprise me. Cricket fans here were up at all hours of the night to watch the final. At 6:30 in the morning, nearly 9 hours after the first ball was bowled and almost 7 weeks after the first match, sleepless devotees all around the country were glued to their TVs. Jordan Bond reports.
This is the moment. It's Archer and Guptill. 2 to win.
Hundreds of supporters were in bars and casinos around the country, and many more wrapped up at home, settling in for what was always going to be a long night. Dozens of people were at Sky City Casino in Auckland, many with their kits of choice on, with their favourite player, or even their own cricket whites. As the game narrowed, every run and every dot ball was met with cheers or a groan, and it all came down to the most thrilling conclusion. Ben Wooding was one unhappy Kiwi afterwards.
Thought we might have cracked them, but they hung in there, and yeah, it's pretty devastating, to be honest. It's the whole crowd here was it's pretty rough.
By the end, there were a lot of overjoyed Brits, but some were almost ready to throw in the towel.
I was so deflated. I thought we'd lost it. I was like, done. 4 more years. And then in like 10 minutes' time, we won it.
Earlier in the night at Christchurch Casino, some Kiwi fans were pretty confident and ended up eating their words.
I think New Zealand got the same amount in the semi-final. Kane Williamson captaincy, Matt Henry with the new ball. We will win this, mate. England will be 5 down, but we will win by 20.
Later in the afternoon, Aucklanders were taking it in their stride and a little more humble.
A little bit dusty, but it was well worth it, that's for sure. It was brilliant watching, you know. You got to love sport, that's for sure, you know. The result didn't go our way, but it was, I loved it.
Fantastic to watch, and to be honest, I think the best team in the tournament won.
Another thought the boundary rule, which England won because of, could be cleaned up.
You know, everyone knew what the rules were, so they're all playing to the same rules. But I kind of would like to think that there was a better system for sort of finding a winner if it was a draw, and it was like a double draw. But, totally proud. Amazing. Those guys are amazing.
Even the Prime Minister watched most of it.
I think probably like a lot of New Zealanders, I'm still feeling a bit traumatised by that match. It was an incredible game. I can't recall seeing a game like it, and I think it will probably go down in history for just being a remarkable game of cricket.
Jacinda Ardern says they may even have some sort of welcome home party up their sleeve.
They have my huge admiration, and I'm sure I'm not the only Kiwi to feel that way. And they'll be getting a hero's welcome. They deserve it.
In Auckland, call Jordan Bond, TNA.
And consider this, as painful as it may be, a misinterpretation of a little understood cricket law may have cost New Zealand the single precious run it needed to win the World Cup, avoiding a super over altogether. Now, if you've been hiding under a rock, it unfolded like this. As England batsman Ben Stokes dived for the crease on the second of 2 runs, a ball fielded by Martin Guptill inadvertently rebounded off his bat and hit the boundary for another 4 runs. So 6 off 1 ball when it mattered most. The devil's in the detail here, because according to Crick Info writer and self-described cricket geek Andrew Miller, Rule 19.8 indicates that Stokes' second on-field run should not have counted. And that would mean that New Zealand could and should have won by 1 run.
So, the rule as it stands, and bear in mind there's nothing simple about cricket's rules. Cricket's laws, in fact, they're laws as opposed to rules, which in itself gives them a higher authority. So you know, you have to take these with a cut through the mystique and all the rest of it. But the law 19.8, which pertains to overthrow or willful act of fielder, states that if a boundary results from an overthrow, which clearly it did, blah-de-blah-de-blah, the runs completed by the batsman, together with the run in progress, if they've already crossed, at the instance of the throw, will count. And that's the key thing. The moment at which the throw came in, the batsman had not crossed to begin their second run.
So Rashid and Stokes hadn't crossed over. Rashid and Stokes had not crossed over. Right.
But there are other grey areas cropped up throughout the game. I mean, obviously, there was a crucial LBW decision very early on, first ball of England's innings. Jason Roy was given not out. This is a grey area. This is sort of grey area that happens all the time. A ball in swinging into the pads. The umpire decided that's not out. A replay showed it might have hit the stumps, but the decision was given. These are grey areas that happen all the time in sport. This particular one is a grey area that next to never happens, because how often does the batsman dive for the crease and accidentally deflect the ball off his bat over the boundary? It happens next to never. And for it to happen in a World Cup final is extraordinary. England could equally have suggested maybe they were robbed in the Super Over. I don't know, you recall the first ball that Jofra Archibald was a wide outside off stump, but was it wide enough to be called wide? Again, it's a grey area. He was certainly a bit peeved, and replay suggested that it passed over the guideline on the pitch, not the wrong side of it. So, I think ultimately when you add up all the twos and fros and the checks and balances, I think we just ended up with an extraordinarily compelling game of cricket, and someone had to end up on the wrong side, because that's the way you do it. You can't share these trophies anymore, and perhaps that's probably the pity. I think back in the day, before Super Overs and all the rest, we probably would have just had both sides raising the trophy, and everyone would have thought, my God, what a game.
So you're arguing swings and roundabouts there, but we just want to torture ourselves a little longer on this lost run, because it would have made the world of difference to us, right? So that would have been the game if he had only got 5 runs off that. Is there any avenue to pursue that, or is that it? The call is made in the moment, and that is it.
Absolutely, yeah. That's how it works. The umpire's decision is final. That is the overarching final ruling that cricket has. I mean, you can have assistants to the umpires, you can have third umpires, you can have decision reviews, etc. But ultimately, the authority of the umpire is ultimate, and the authority of the umpire on this occasion was 6 runs is the verdict. And the fact that nobody batted an eyelid at the time, everyone thought, yep, that seems right. They've run 2, it's gone to the boundary. 2 + 4 = 6. I mean, none of the New Zealanders quibbled it. No one in the press box quibbled it. The batsmen really didn't quibble it. Ben Stokes apologised for it, because obviously it was an inadvertent moment, but absolutely no one in the heat of the moment thought that there had been an injustice. And so,
do you realise
you recalibrate all the time in the course of a live sporting occasion.
Andrew, do you realise how much salt you are pouring into our wounds by writing about this?
Well, I'm just a geek for the rules, I guess. It just cropped up, and I thought, well, that's a curious one.
Well,
but,
if you're a geek for the
game it was.
Yeah, if you're a geek for the rules, let's put another few to you then, because as you can imagine, huge debate here whether a game of this magnitude should be decided by super overs and then by boundaries. What do you reckon? Fair or unfair?
Now, I must admit, again, it's one of these things that you don't necessarily check going into a match of this magnitude. You're not going to start thinking, what on earth's going to happen if after everything has been said and done over the course of 8 hours of sport, we still haven't got a winner. I must admit, I didn't check the ruling. I don't think any of the players on either side checked the ruling. It was just before they went out to the Super Over, someone mentioned, oh, by the way, if you do tie this, England win. I was like, okay, but I suppose, again, it comes down to the calibration of expectations. There was at no stage in New Zealand's chase were they in any doubt that they need to score more runs than England had scored. And that is crucial, I think, in this game, because, you have your target. The target didn't change. It was just what the target was. It wasn't the case that they got to the end of the game and suddenly said, oh, by the way, did you know that if you didn't score more runs than England, you weren't going to win it? They knew. You can see the moment that the bails were whipped off. New Zealand knew they'd lost. England knew they'd won. So again, it's just the way the sport is being tailored for this tournament. You've got to have a winner and loser, and somewhere someone decided the rules. But if it was up to me, and again, it's probably not what you want to hear at this time, but if it was up to me, I would put more store on wickets, to be perfectly honest. I think it's a batsman's game already. I think the fact that New Zealand lost 8 wickets and England lost 10 probably means that there's a moral justification for thinking that they fared better, if you like. But again, these were the parameters by which the game was played, and both sides knew that was the deal. It's a bit like duck Marcus Lewis method when it comes to rain rules. You
the rules are the rules, is what you're saying.
The workings,
yeah.
But you know the rules when you go out to chase a reduced target in a rain-reduced game. You might not quite understand how on earth you've got to that target, but you just set yourself to chase it, and if you get it, you get it. If you don't, you don't. It's cricket, and cricket is an extraordinary sport.
So, as a through and through cricket geek, then how does this compare to other World Cup finals? Where would you put it?
Head and shoulders the best sporting final I've ever watched. I think in any sport, any gender, any era. In all honesty, I would say team sports certainly. I would say the Federer Nadal Wimbledon final in 2008 was up there for sustained drama, but I think this trumps it just because of the sheer inseparability of 8 hours. How on earth do you end up with a situation where you tie the main event, you then tie the Super Over? It's in a World Cup final of all the matches in which to do it. It beggars belief. And, I'm talking to you at, 3:30 in the morning because I'm still completely wired from watching the greatest sporting drama I've ever seen in my life.
So that was Cricinfo's UK editor Andrew Miller. It is 25, almost 26 after 5, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm sure you've got some thoughts on this. Let me know what you think. They won fair and square, didn't they? We knew the rules when we went into it. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. I will get under the desk now, waiting for the onslaught. Look forward to hearing from you. New Zealand is set to produce 100% recyclable plastic food packaging range for the first time. The government's pumping $3 million into new equipment that will create recyclable packaging for things like meat trays, deli takeaways and bakeries. Jessie Chang reports.
Plastic waste has long been a headache to deal with after its short life. And when China closed its doors to recycling the world's waste, that's highlighted the shortage of local recycling facilities here in New Zealand. But the Associate Environment Minister, Eugenie Sage, says that's about to change.
This will be the first time in New Zealand that we have a plant that can take PET plastic, the plastic that's used in drink bottles, reprocess that and turn it into 100% recycled plastic packaging.
The government is investing $3 million, or around half the cost of the project being developed by Pact Group New Zealand at its plant in Albany. Eric Kestrup from the group says once it's operational, the company will be able to recycle 10,000 tonnes of plastic a year. So how will it actually work?
Take the bottles, they are then shredded to get the flake. That flake goes into the beginning of this new process. It's totally decontaminated, and at the end of it comes out pellets. Pellets then goes into another extruder and it produces sheet. That sheet goes into a thermoformer, and in the thermoforming stage it stamps out the trays.
And Eric Kestrup says those trays, once used and cleaned, can then go through the whole process again. Eugenie Sage says this is an important step for the country.
There is other recycled PET packaging in New Zealand, but the component of recyclable I think is around 80%, because for food products you need a very clean plastic barrier, and so those other products have got a thin component of new plastic in them, but this, because of the decontamination and the washing and the reprocessing, will enable the packaging to be 100% recycled PET.
And dairy giant Fonterra is on board, as Brett Henshaw explains.
Fonterra have signed up to zero waste to landfill by 2025 and 100% recyclable, reusable and compostable by 2025 as well.
Eugenie Sage says the public also have to do their part and make sure they are recycling correctly.
Getting the right materials in the crate is absolutely critical, and keeping glass out of the materials stream is also critical. There are some issues with that here in Auckland, but keeping material streams separate and keeping them clean is really important. So yes, people need to do better. One thing people can do to help is ensuring that their containers are clean when they put them in the curbside bin.
But Eugenie Sage is unable to give a figure on how much of a dent this new recycling initiative will make in the total amount of plastic used in this country, saying New Zealand has very poor waste data. It's expected to be up and running in about a year. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
Auckland's mayoral race is shaping up to be a bit of a blast from the past. The former ACT MP, National MP and Auckland Mayor John Banks is now strongly hinting at another run at the city's top job. So far, current Mayor Phil Goff and former MP John Tamahere are the two most prominent contenders to say they will run. Mr Banks was Mayor of Auckland City between 2001 and 4 and 2007 to 2010, but was comfortably beaten by Len Brown in the first Super City elections. The 72-year-old claims he has yet to decide whether to run again and is still seeing if he has enough cut through to gain support. So we sent our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe out to see whether a Banks campaign was what Aucklanders are looking for, starting in the North Shore suburb of Takapuna.
Well, I actually don't mind John Banks. I mean, he's very forthright, and I don't think Goff has really delivered what we wanted him to, except maybe a lot of rates, which is very expensive. So I'm not quite sure that I want him back in.
We need some new blood, get some new ideas and get cracking, because they just sit on their bums and don't do anything.
Have you heard about John Banks?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, good on him. He keeps going and going, doesn't he? A bit like Winston.
Is it someone you'd be interested in voting for?
No, at this stage I don't want any of them.
Don't know much about him, but I like Phil Goff. He's good.
You'd choose Goff over Banks?
Yes. I don't know why, but...
We also visited the Auckland electorate of Mount Roskill, one of the most multi-ethnic suburbs in the city and typically a Labour stronghold. Here's what voters had to say at the Sandringham shops. Do you know the name John Banks?
Yes.
What do you think of him?
Good man.
Yeah. Would you vote for him if he ran?
Yes. Why not?
Oh, yes, he was a mayor a long time ago.
What do you think about him running again for the mayoralty?
Is he running again? Oh, maybe he's okay.
John Banks again? He's considering it. What would you say to that?
I don't know. I should be interested to see his policies.
And the current Mayor, Phil Goff, isn't worried about seeing his former rival back in the race.
John has stood for the mayoralty before, obviously, but at the end of each term that he had as mayor, he was defeated twice and rejected by Aucklanders. So, you know, if he sought my advice, which he won't, just enjoy your retirement, John. You've earned it.
And while John Banks still won't say whether he is officially running, this afternoon he said he had been overwhelmed by the support he had received and assured us a decision on whether he's in or out will be made in the next 10 days. Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, allegations Uyghurs in China are being forced into slave labour, making high street clothing. A man accused of being a lookout for a violent dairy robbery goes on trial in the High Court. And the colossal Cactus story that's got a little bit prickly. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. 2101 on the text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. 5:32 headlines now with Susanna.
The Crown says a man whose body was found at McLaren Falls in Bay of Plenty last year died after being held in a chokehold in the back of a car. Leon Wilson and Christopher Smith are on trial in the High Court at Hamilton, charged with manslaughter and the kidnapping of Mitchell Patterson in July last year. The prosecution says while there was no intention to kill the 26-year-old, he died after being restrained. A leading Australian bookmaker is refunding punters who backed New Zealand to win the Cricket World Cup final, describing the method used to determine England as winners an absolute disgrace. Sportsbet said it has refunded nearly 11,500 people, about $445,000, after they supported the Black Caps to win the final. England were crowned champions on a boundary count-back rule after the dramatic match was tied and then again after a super over. Sportbet's Rich Hummerstone says it wouldn't be just to take the money from customers who backed a New Zealand side that effectively didn't lose the game. An overseas investment company has been fined and ordered to pay costs totalling more than $500,000 for buying sensitive land without approval. BCH Investments had bought the 5 hectares of land in Auckland next to a reserve for almost $13 million in 2013. The police are investigating injuries to a 6-month-old baby admitted to Nelson Hospital on Friday. Acting Detective Sergeant Robin Green says the child was taken to hospital with burns and later transferred to the Hutt Hospital burns unit. Ms Green says they are treating the injuries as non-accidental. The Associate Environment Minister Eugenie Sage says people need to think harder about recycling. The government today announced it's investing $3 million to create the country's first 100% recycled plastic food packaging range in Auckland. The Pact Group plant will be able to recycle plastic from 10 common product lines, including meat and bakery trays. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, and you've come in at the right time because it's business news, isn't it, Maddie? Madison Reedy is in the studio to tell us all things business. Napier's Port. So you've got some more details about its upcoming public offer. So how do you get a slice of that action if you're interested?
Yes, so 45% of the Napier Port is going to go public and be listed on the stock exchange. And they've worked through that detail, and the Regional Council has decided that they're going to price the shares of the Napier Port at between $2.27 and $2.60 each. Now, with the amount of shares that they're selling and that are in the Napier Port holdings, that values the company at up to $497.6 million. So certainly big fry there. That money raised will be used to pay down debt and also build another wharf at the Napier Port. Now, if you're wanting to get involved in this one, iwi locals and staff in Napier and staff of the company will get first dibs on shares in a priority offer. So if you're not them, then you will have to deal with the sloppy seconds that will be placed on the New Zealand Stock Exchange after that. Now, while there has been little meat that has been placed on the stock exchange for retail investors to sink their teeth into, it has been proven lately that they're not willing to just eat whatever's thrown on their plate, as we saw recently with the South medicinal marijuana research company that listed on the stock exchange recently. Didn't go as well as they were hoping for. Not much interest garnered there, but you never know. Retail investors might be more interested in shipping and trade than they are marijuana.
Interesting. Okay, so financial services firm, this is AMP. Now, they've hit a stumbling block in its attempt to sell off its life insurance business. What's gone wrong there?
So what's gone on here is the Reserve Bank of New Zealand has stuck its neck out yet again. So AMP, which is this financial services firm that's Australian-based but does operate quite largely in New Zealand too, it has been struggling ever since that Australian Royal Commission into banking misconduct. They were slammed by Kenneth Hayne, the Royal Commissioner, in that, and if you can remember that fees for no service scandal, which stemmed from AMP, where they were found to be charging their customers services for services that they never got, and then when they were asked about it by regulators, they actually lied to them about it, and because of that, their net profit was actually slashed by 97% last financial year, and KiwiSavers have cashed out big time out of AMP's schemes to the tune of over 500 million Australian dollars. So they've been obviously strategizing, and they made the decision to get out of life insurance. So they cut a deal to sell their Australian and New Zealand-based wealth protection business to the Bermuda-based business Resolution Life. Now, they were set to get $3.5 billion Australian dollars from that deal, and it seemed that it was all but done, and it was actually due to go ahead at the end of this year. But it seems that they forgot to check out the regulatory approval process amidst that. So Resolution Life has since applied to the Reserve Bank of New Zealand to change hands and change the control of this wealth protection business. But the Reserve Bank came with what seemed like a bit of a surprise to the two firms. The Reserve Bank said it won't even consider the deal unless Resolution Life has separate ring-fenced assets held specifically in New Zealand for the benefit of local policyholders. AMP says that means that the deal is highly unlikely to go ahead with the current terms and conditions that it's at now. They say that that's obviously exceptionally disappointing, and it's had to cut its interim dividend payout as a result.
Okay, let's have a quick tour around the markets. What else has been happening?
The NZX Top 50 index closed down 0.3%. That's a fall of 35 points to close at 10,666 tonight. The New Zealand dollar, that's buying at 67.2 US cents, 95.5 to the Aussie, and 53.5 to the British pence.
Thanks, Madison. Madison Reedy with Business. A man accused of being a lookout for a violent dairy robbery has gone on trial in the High Court court at Auckland. Geeta Patel and her son Siddhartha were both stabbed while minding their family business, Highlight Dairy, in the suburb of Grey Lynn in June last year. Ngā Tamakainua denies keeping watch while a teenager entered the store with a large kitchen knife. Our court reporter Annika Smith was at the first day of his trial.
Ngā Tamakainua is accused of being a lookout while a 16-year-old tried to rob Grey Lynn's Highlight Dairy on the 19th of June last year. Crown Prosecutor Luke Fraser said it all began with the teenager, who can't be named, pretending to look at ice creams until the shop was clear of customers.
As soon as he was alone in the store, he moved behind the counter and began stabbing Siddhartha. He stabbed him 6 times. His diaphragm was pierced, his colon was punctured, his lung collapsed.
Luke Fraser said Siddhartha's mother came to his aid while the 16-year-old tried to open the till.
Geeta heard the commotion and came running out to stop. He pushed her to the ground, stabbing her in the process. Her shoulder was broken during the altercation and she received a cut to her forehead.
It's not disputed that Ngā Tamakainua was standing outside the dairy at the time. CCTV footage captured him standing next to a bin. Mr Fraser said it also showed the pair casing the dairy moments before the teenager went inside. It's the Crown's case that while Mr Kainua did not hold the knife, he knew about it.
The Crown says that the defendant is at law criminally responsible for the wounds suffered by Siddhartha and Geeta Patel. The defendant knowingly and intentionally aided, abetted or incited, meaning organised, helped or encouraged in any way, shape or form to commit the offending.
Mr Kainua has pleaded not guilty to aggravated wounding and assault with intent to rob. His co-defendant is before the youth court. This afternoon, the court heard from Constable Amy King, one of the first police officers at the scene. She described following a trail of blood down Tuarangi Road.
My colleague noticed a red substance similar to blood. I then continued walking down Tuarangi Road with my colleague and we noticed a lot of red splatters on the pavement that appeared to be blood.
Ms King said the trail eventually led them to a bloodied knife. The Crown says this was the knife the teenager used in the attack. Mr Kainua's lawyer Shane Tate said his client had no idea the teenager was carrying a knife.
He effectively accompanied the principal offender to the dairy fully unaware that he was in possession of a knife and certainly wasn't there in any capacity as a lookout.
The judge-alone trial before Justice Galt is set down for 1 week. Atuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith aho.
It is about 19 minutes away from 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Now, clothing companies, including Target and Cotton On, are reviewing their supply chains after an ABC investigation into the use of forced labour in textile factories in northwestern China. China has been carrying out a mass campaign against Muslim Uyghur citizens in Xinjiang province, more than 1 million people being held in so-called re-education camps. Now, it's alleged they're also being used as forced labour. The ABC's Sophie McNeil has this report.
Gulnor Idris is a member of Australia's Uyghur community. Last month, the Melbourne resident received a disturbing video call from her older sister Dilnor, who is trapped in Xinjiang.
She looked very exhausted and emotionally very distressed.
In 2017, Dilnor, who is a trained nurse, was sent to a re-education camp. But in May this year, she says that Chinese authorities sent her to work in a textile factory.
My sister is a nurse. She didn't know how to make the clothes.
With security forces closely monitoring all communication in the region, a desperate Dilnor took the risk of holding up a series of hastily scribbled notes for her sister to read.
She said, "If I am not released, cannot get out of here, please speak up for me, stand for me, never give up."
Dilnor told her sister she is made to sleep in a dormitory in the factory and that she is only allowed home to see her children and parents once a week. She said that workers were brought in, shackled and handcuffed, and that if they complained, they were punished.
They are using innocent people and they are not giving them enough money, and also their food is bad. They are torturing them in every way.
German academic Dr. Adrian Zenz is credited with helping to uncover the network of camps in Xinjiang. After researching and analysing official Communist Party documents and state media articles online, he now believes the Chinese government has plans to put as many camp detainees to work as it can.
Basically, there's a huge scheme going on, a huge plan in Xinjiang to put all kinds of people into different forms of involuntary labour. This kind of cooperation is not voluntary, it's being enforced.
And he's found documents which show how detainee labour is being used to attract companies to set up shop in Xinjiang.
For example, if a factory trains and then employs a camp detainee, they get 5,000 renminbi per worker over a course of 3 years. They also get intensive subsidies. For example, they can use a factory building for free for the first 2 years.
Target Australia, Cotton On, Jeans West, Dangerfield, IKEA and H&M source cotton from Xinjiang. Four Corners can reveal that Cotton On and Target Australia are now investigating their relationships with suppliers in the region. Dr. Adrian Zenz again.
Western companies stand an increasing risk of having products made by forced or at least highly involuntary labour somewhere in the supply chains.
Dr. Adrian Zenz ending that report from the ABC's Sophie McNeil. Donald Trump has been accused of racism after posting offensive tweets attacking Democratic congresswomen. He claimed the women originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, before suggesting they go back. 3 of the congresswomen were born and raised in the US, while the 4th moved to the US from Somalia as a child. The stoush comes after Trump announced that US immigration and customs enforcement officers were preparing to round up migrant families that have received deportation orders. The ABC's Zoe Daniel reports.
Donald Trump is again being accused of racism after tweeting progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, he said. Then come back and show us how it's done. These places need your help badly. You can't leave fast enough. 3 of the 4 women in a progressive group that's become known as the Squad, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib and Ayanna Pressley, were born in the United States. The 4th, Ilhan Omar, is a Somalian refugee. The president didn't name anyone, but he's increasingly infuriated with the women, all of whom are prominent opponents of his administration. His comments come as 10 cities brace for immigration raids, repeatedly flagged by the president as part of a plan to deport at least 2,000 undocumented migrants.
That is a warrant. No, it's not. It's a Department of Homeland Security order.
The administration says the raids will target criminals who are in the country illegally and have already been ordered to leave by the courts. But the plan has sparked a public information campaign to inform people about their rights. This recording of an attempted ICE arrest in March is one example.
It's a warrant. Okay. No, it's not a warrant. It's not a warrant under the Constitution of the United States.
The Obama administration conducted mass deportations that reached levels of up to 400,000 people per year. The Trump administration has deported about 250,000 people this year. However, Democratic New York Mayor Bill de Blasio, who's running for president, says Donald Trump has weaponized immigration enforcement. Acting US Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Ken Cuccinelli has been doing the rounds of the US cable talk shows.
First of all, have the raids started? I can't speak to operational specifics and won't.
He's also refused to confirm whether agents will separate children from their parents.
In the same way I wasn't willing to talk about operational details, that would be an operational detail that I'm not going to comment on. There are 1 million people, including families, with removal orders. The priority remains for ICE to get at criminals.
Since the raids were scheduled, delayed and rescheduled, many who may be targeted have been laying low, waiting for a knock at the door.
Zoe Daniel reporting there from Washington. Back home now, over 150 teachers are beginning their reo haerenga as part of a $12 million program to increase the use of te reo Maori in the classroom. Te Ahu o te reo Maori is a pilot program aimed at increasing teachers' understanding of te reo, and already nearly 700 teachers have signed up. At an orientation day in Otaki, teachers turned up in the middle of the school holidays to do their part in revitalising the language. Mariana Johnson was there.
The kaiako have now become the students. Teachers from Kapiti, Horowhenua and Te Waiponamu kicked off their 17-week reo course today with a pōwhiri. They follow in the footsteps of teachers in Taranaki and the Waikato who are also attending courses as part of the government's goal to integrate te reo Māori into all classrooms by 2025. The Associate Education Minister, Kelvin Davis, wants all New Zealanders to speak te reo.
But we've got to do it in a way that brings people along on board. We've got to normalise it. We've got to be able to hear it in not just in our schools, but in the streets and in homes, in businesses. And that's when we know that we're really moving forward as a nation in terms of taking hold of te reo Māori.
The program is being run by the Kauru Education Group, led by Kai Whakahaere Te Whatanui Winiata, whose whānau have been key to revitalising te reo Māori in the rohi. He says the aim of Kauru is to produce speakers of te reo where the kōrero flows like water.
There is a kōrero that is said, ko te wahapū te tino taumata o te pū kōrero. And so the wahapū or the river mouth is what we aspire to be as a orator or as a person who can command the reo.
For these kaiako, to kōrero Māori like that is still a moemoea, a dream. A Kapiti primary school teacher, Chris Bolton of Tiatiawa, simply wants to kōrero Māori with her teenage daughter, who is conversational in the reo. And as lead teacher for Māori at Kapiti Primary School, of which about a third of the students are Māori, Miss Bolton says whānau want more reo for their tamariki.
And lots of their whānau haven't got it. And because lots of our whānau come from generations where, same as mine, where they have not learnt te reo Māori, and lots of them want it back. They want it for their children. So it's really important, as it's important to our school and our school community.
Early childhood teacher Bethany O'Hagan decided that if she didn't step up, no one else would.
I would be using it regularly enough within my daily practice with tamariki and with my other kaiako on the floor that it would make them passionate about wanting to then share that, or the children to be sharing it with their whānau.
The government is yet to decide whether the program will continue a te rātou next year, but Kelvin Davis hopes it will keep running long term. I te whanganui a tara mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Mariana Johnson tēnei.
So why did the little blue penguins cross the road? Well, nobody knows for sure, but as many as 3 penguins are believed to have taken shelter under a sushi store at the Wellington railway station after a perilous journey across a major road. Now, Jack Mace is DOC's operations manager for the Wellington district, and he joins me on the line now. Jack, what can you tell us about the fate of these penguins? What do we know?
So we understand that the police got the penguins this morning and in consultation with the zoo, and based on the advice we gave them on Saturday, they've released them back into the wild.
And do we know, was it one whole family, or what would have led them to be, nesting underneath a sushi store at the railway station?
Yeah, it's a bit of a funny spot. About this time of year around Wellington Harbour, penguins are coming ashore looking for nests in places where they can lay their eggs in August. So it's likely these penguins were just trying to scout out a good, safe home.
So are they pretty, resilient? Because we had a look at the kind of route that they would have had to take from water, and there are a number of obstacles in the way, aren't there? Busy roads, for example?
Yeah, there certainly are. They are quite tough little creatures. Obviously, they're very vulnerable to things like dogs and obviously to cars as well, which is why we're really pleased that the police did what they did this morning with that road being particularly busy on a Monday morning. Good to keep the penguins safe.
So are they habitual little creatures? I mean, is there any chance they could kind of womble back to the sushi shop?
Yeah, absolutely. They actually have quite a high site fidelity, so once they've found a good nest site, they'll often come back. Now, the hope is that this won't seem like a good nest site to them, but we're going to be monitoring it pretty closely together with some of our community penguin watchers over the next few days, and if they do come back, we'll move them along again and then close up the site that they were using.
So, Jack, basically Penguin Patrol, you just keep an eye out to make sure that they don't retrace their steps, in essence.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you know, was there much of a nest? Have you been told what was underneath the sushi shop? Have they gone and made themselves at home? Any eggs, for example?
No, they don't lay eggs this early in the year in Wellington, thankfully. It's a really tight hole. We've had a look at it, and I mean, it's sort of probably about 6 inches wide, so you'd struggle to get right in there, but for a penguin, it's just perfectly cosy.
I bet. Hey, it's good news that they're back where they should be. That is Jack Mace from DOC, who's the operations manager for the Wellington district there. So they think there was 3 of these cute little blue penguins stuffed into quite a small space, as he was describing there, underneath a sushi store at the railway station. But they are back where they should be, and now there'll be a bit of a penguin patrol to make sure they don't return. Let's go to Wimbledon now. Novak Djokovic has won Wimbledon's men's final for the 5th time, retaining the title in a first ever final set tiebreaker. Djokovic prevailed in an epic nearly 5-hour match against 8-time champion Roger Federer. The BBC's David Ornstein was there.
And that's it. On a massive miss hit, Wimbledon number 5 for the Serbian superstar. What a treat this has been.
The culmination of a Wimbledon classic and historic contest that will live long in the memory. A meeting of the top 2 seeds, 2 of the greatest players of all time. This had the makings of an epic and did not disappoint. In front of a raucous centre court crowd, Djokovic and Federer split the first 4 sets, and that made for a titanic, nail-biting 5th. The momentum swung one way and the other. Federer earning 2 championship points, Djokovic saving them both.
Mr. Federer is trying to call a fireball. It was called out. Federer's challenging it.
There were disputed line calls, hawk-eye challenges, and an ever-growing, engulfing sense of tension.
Hold on, though. Hold on. Djokovic is going to have a word about this.
12 games all, Wimbledon's first ever deciding tiebreak in singles would be needed to separate the pair. And after almost 5 hours, Wimbledon's longest ever final was settled when Federer miscued a forehand, allowing Djokovic to triumph, successfully defending his crown, becoming a 5-time SW19 champion and collecting a 16th Grand Slam title. For Federer, more history will have to wait, but even at 37 years old, you suspect he'll be back.
It was long, it had everything, I had my chances, so did he, and I thought we played some great tennis, so in a way I have to be very happy with my performance as well, but Novak, it's great, congratulations man, that was crazy, well done.
I think this was, if not the most exciting and thrilling finals I was ever part of, then definitely top 2 or 3 in my career against one of the greatest players of all time, Roger, who I respect a lot. And unfortunately, in this kind of matches, one of the players has to lose.
The hype coming into these championships focused on the sport's emerging talent, and although in Coco Gauff a star was born, ultimately it was experience that told. An unforgettable fortnight, and in 12 months' time, we'll do it all again.
And that's David Ornstein at Wimbledon there. Just a call for information from the police. They are investigating the injuries of a 6-month-old baby after she was admitted to Nelson Hospital with burn injuries. The police are treating those injuries as non-accidental. The baby was admitted to hospital on Friday at about 4:30 and has been transferred to Hutt Hospital Burns Unit in Wellington for ongoing treatment, and they are appealing to members of the public with information about about that baby. They're asking people to call the Nelson Child Protection Team. If they have any details, we'll make those numbers available on our Facebook page. Let's get to some of your feedback now. Spirited feedback, but not about what you may think, not the cricket. John Banks, actually, and his talk of perhaps throwing his hat in the ring for the Auckland mayoralty, and he's done it twice before. He was actually mayor twice before. This person, Barry, actually has got in touch to say, regarding John Banks and his mayoral hopes, take your pension and go away. He is too old and has his head stuck in the past. We do not need anyone of his kind in positions of power. Perhaps an age limit. No one on a pension would keep self-centred, can I say blowhards in the background. Thanks for that, Barry. But don't you reckon, well, that's a bit ageist, isn't it? If you're going to say that nobody on a pension can stand for public office, we'd be taking out a few members of Parliament, including Winston Peters and others to boot. And one person, Victoria's got in contact about the cricket. I asked whether we lost the game, didn't we? Those are the rules. Victoria says New Zealand won the Cricket World Cup. Really? Were you watching a different game? We achieved more wickets, which is what cricket is all about, not how many boundaries a team got. Seriously, says Victoria. And Catherine from Rotorua says, please can cricket now be returned to the sports section of the bulletin? One wonders what other news and comment has been displaced recently. Not so keen on the cricket then, Catherine. Well, if you're still with us after 6, we'll have something for you too, Catherine.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leātaua tēnei. A misinterpretation of a little understood cricket law may have cost the Black Caps the single precious run they needed to win the World Cup, avoiding a super over altogether. As England batsman Ben Stokes dived for the crease on the second of 2 runs, a ball fielded by Martin Guptill inadvertently rebounded off his bat and hit the boundary for another 4 runs, so 6 off 1 ball. Cricinfo writer Andrew Miller told Checkpoint that under the rules, Stokes' second on-field run should not have counted.
If a boundary results from an overthrow, which clearly it did, blah-de-blah-de-blah, the runs completed by the batsman together with the run in progress, if they've already crossed, at the instance of the throw will count. And that's the key thing, that the moment at which the throw came in, the batsman had not crossed to begin their second run.
Andrew Miller admits there is still potential scope for ambiguity in the wording of the law. The Crown says a man whose body was found at McLaren Falls in Bay of Plenty died after being held in a chokehold in the back of a car. Leon Wilson and Christopher Smith are on trial in the High Court at Hamilton, charged with manslaughter and the kidnapping and manslaughter of Mitchell Patterson in July last year. Mr. Patterson was a methamphetamine addict and was supplying the drug. The prosecutor, Jacinda Foster, says while there was no intention to kill the 26-year-old, he died after being restrained. A third person, Chloe Kerridge, faces charges including kidnapping. 5 other people have pleaded guilty to various charges relating to Mr. Patterson's death. An overseas investment company has been fined and ordered to pay costs totalling more than $500,000 for buying sensitive land without approval. The High Court has ordered BCH Investments to pay the maximum penalty of $300,000, along with $288,000 in costs for buying 5 hectares of Auckland land without permission from the Overseas Investment Office. BCH must also sell the properties in Albany within 2 years. The company bought the land for almost $13 million in 2013 and had planned to develop into residential sections for sale. That work was already underway when the Overseas Investment Office discovered the breaches in 2014. Justice Powell said given the size, scope and nature of the development proposed, BCH should have looked into the rules. An Auckland man accused of being a lookout in a violent dairy robbery says he didn't know his co-accused had a knife. Geeta Patel and her son Siddhartha were both stabbed while minding their family business, Highlight Dairy in Grey Lynn last year. Ngātama Kaiinua is on trial in the High Court at Auckland after pleading not guilty to aggravated wounding and assault with intent to rob. He is accused of planning the robbery with the teenager, who can't be named, but his defence lawyer Shane Tate says that his client had no idea what was about to happen.
he effectively accompanied the principal offender to the dairy fully unaware that he was in possession of a knife and certainly wasn't there in any capacity as a lookout.
The judge-alone trial before Justice Galt is set down for 1 week. A man is banned from owning pets and must pay $2,000 to the SPCA after throwing a dog against a wall last year, causing it to go blind in one eye. The Mount Maunganui man was responsible for the dog, which belonged to his girlfriend's mother. He also has to pay reparation and costs totalling $955. Chen Liu reports.
Alexander McGregor and his girlfriend were meant to be taking care of Rafa, a male Maltese crossbred dog. McGregor admitted to an SPCA inspector that he had forcibly thrown the dog in a rugby pass motion into a room. He said the dog was not well trained and was preventing him from relaxing. McGregor was sentenced this morning in the Tauranga District Court. He was disqualified from owning or exercising authority over domestic pets for 5 years. Quote Liu Aho.
The head of a packaging company says a cash injection means the plant will eventually be able to recycle 10,000 tonnes of plastic each year. Earlier today, the government announced it's investing $3 million to create the country's first 100% recycled plastic food packaging range in Auckland. The Pact Group plant will be able to recycle plastic from 10 common product lines, including meat and bakery trays. Eric Kestrup from the group says those trays can go through the whole process again.
They are then shredded to get the flake. That flake goes into the beginning of this new process. It's totally decontaminated, and at the end of it comes out pellets. Pellets then goes into another extruder, and it produces sheet. That sheet goes into a thermoformer, and in the thermoforming stage, it stamps out the trays.
The new plant will be running in about 12 months. China has posted its worst quarterly growth figures in nearly 3 decades amid an ongoing trade war with the United States and weakening consumption at home and abroad. The world's second largest economy grew by 6.2% in the last quarter, compared with the same period the year before. It continues a trend that has led China to cut taxes to encourage domestic consumption. The growth figures have fuelled speculation that new measures will be announced soon. It's 6:05. The Black Cap skipper Kane Williamson concedes it's tough coming to terms with the final outcome of the Cricket World Cup final. England eventually lifted the trophy at Lord's, but only because they hit more boundaries. Batting first, New Zealand scored 241 for 8 and England were bowled out for 241 off the last ball of their 50th over, leaving the match tied. Both teams scored 15 runs in a super over, and England won the trophy because they hit more boundaries in the match.
2 attempts to separate them with a winner and a loser still didn't perhaps sort of shine with one side coming through. It just is what it is, really. The rules are there at the start. No one probably thought that would have to sort of result to some of that stuff, but yeah, very tough to swallow.
Kane Williamson. The Australia coach Lisa Alexander believes it's time for the Netball World Cup format to change after romping through the preliminary group stage 3 with 3 landslide wins. Following the Diamonds' 92-24 thumping of Sri Lanka, Alexander said there were too many one-sided contests at the Liverpool tournament. She's also reiterated a call for more rest days, saying 8 tests in the space of 10 days is too much. Tonight, the Silver Ferns play Zimbabwe. And the Black Ferns have retained their number 1 world ranking in women's rugby. New Zealand's dismissed England's challenge with a 28-13 win in the deciding game of the Super Series in San Diego. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Not Your Average Cricket Show looks back on a better-than-average Cricket World Cup for New Zealand. Dana Johansson offers her thoughts on the opening stages of the other World Cup on at the moment, the one where you put the ball through the net. And April Henderson talks about the crucial role dance played in the formative years of hip-hop on Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Manawatu, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Central High Country. Mainly fine weather with isolated showers tonight. Rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms tomorrow morning and afternoon, followed by showers in the west but becoming fine elsewhere. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine tonight, a period of afternoon or evening rain tomorrow. Horowhenua to Wellington and Wairarapa, mainly fine with isolated showers. Morning rain tomorrow, possibly heavy, then mainly fine from the afternoon. For Marlborough and Nelson, rain developing this evening, sometimes heavy or thundery, clearing early tomorrow, but returning tomorrow night. Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms at times. Canterbury, fine weather with variable high cloud. Otago and Southland, rain developing with snow down to 600 metres tonight, becoming fine early tomorrow, but showers likely about the south coast. And Chatham Islands, a few showers tonight and rain tomorrow night. You're with RNZ National. Indira Stewart is back tomorrow morning at 5 with First Up. It's now 6:08.
Thanks, Susanna. But right now you're with Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Australian bookies Sportsbet has today refunded punters more than $400,000 in bets on the Black Caps after this morning's knife-edge World Cup loss against England. Both teams scored 241 after 50 overs, and an extra super over also ended in a tie with both teams scoring 15. But England took the trophy because they scored more boundaries during the game. Sportsbet labelled that decision as an absolute disgrace, saying it couldn't take money off 11,000 punters when the Black Caps didn't technically lose. Fans at Lord's were also left confused and bewildered after this morning's result. As sports reporters Ravinda Hunia and Simon Hampton report, many had never heard of a super over, and supporters on both sides were left shaking their heads.
It was a Cricket World Cup finale no one could have predicted.
7 weeks of cricket, 48 games, 1 ball, here's Bolt. They're going to push. Are we in for a super over? They've got to go quick, they've got to go quick.
New Zealand and England battling it out in a super over to see who would become World Cup champions for the very first time.
This is the moment, it's Archer to Guptill, 2 to win. Guptill's going to push for 2, they've got to go. Throw's got to go to the keeper's end. He's got it, England have won the World Cup.
But what is a super over? Not many people I spoke to after the match knew the answer either.
It was an unbelievable game and can't quite believe how we got into that super over at the end, really. The New Zealand were just unbelievably unlucky, really. I thought you played amazingly, and for the second half of that whole game I thought you were going to win. So commiserations, but I think a draw would have been a fair result, really. But incredible game and incredible atmosphere for Lords. That's kind of unbelievable, really.
There was a lot of shuffling of paper where I was sitting to try and work it out, but I've seen a few of them in 2020, and I'm not entirely sure it's the best way to solve a tied game. It's a bit like a penalty shootout in football, but you have to have a way to decide it, I guess. But it was always going to be tough, and in the end the super over was tied as well as the game was tied. It probably shows you it was just one of the most incredible games of cricket you'll ever see.
From a tie in score to sudden death, it was England who became victors at home for the very first time, and what it meant to its home fans was evident.
We started batting and we realised that actually 240 was a really good score. They went super over. I thought when you guys hit your 6, wow, I thought it was over. Archer, West Indian or not, he had the right shirt on today. Leaving Black Caps fans deflated, confused, and wondering how a grand final could end like this.
Unbelievable. It's hard to explain, Your legs are wobbling, your heart's racing. It was an impossible win that they just pulled off and got ripped out right out from under us. Stokes, where it hit them and went to the boundary, we'd won it until then. And then super over and it's a draw. And they win on most boundaries. It's just an unbelievable game. It's just ridiculous.
Did you think that a super over would eventuate, and did you know anything about a super over?
Yeah, I did know super over would go on a draw, but it's just phenomenal how it ended that way. Everything went their way today.
Extremely proud. We weren't really given a chance before the tournament, and then to get this close, to tie the game effectively and lose, pretty gutting.
Magnificent game, and one in a lifetime. There'll be no game like that again. 2 draws in one day.
Every Kiwi we've spoken to are calling it 2 draws, while the English are calling it a win. Do you think that it's a deserved win by the English?
It could have gone either way. It was just so close. It was just great to be at the ground to see such a spectacle with fine margins. Just a close, gut-wrenching, really.
Not so confusing for former White Ferns captain Susie Bates, though. She is well versed in the super over rule from her experience in T20 cricket, but says it doesn't soften the blow of a national loss.
I actually didn't know those were the rules. I thought that maybe the team who had finished top in the table would have won, but when I heard it was a super over, I sort of thought that was, I guess, at least a fair way to try and get a result, but they're never fun. I have played in a couple through 2020, and look, it's just one of those things. You get a batter that can tee off, and it's just critical moments can go one way or the other, and unfortunately, like I said, England got those, I guess, good results and managed to win at home, which is, great for them and great for the crowd, but the New Zealand supporters, I think, will not forget that one in a while.
Bates only just made her way to the UK once she realised the Black Caps' fate, and says a game of this magnitude will only bring one of two things: great celebration or great disappointment.
What a game, probably the best World Cup final ever in history, and look, it's sad that there has to be a team on the losing side, and I thought New Zealand were brilliant in the field, and there were just some critical moments at the end that didn't go our way, and unfortunately we were on the other side of that final, but yeah, still a little bit emotional about it all. I was with lots of the Kiwi families, and it was pretty tense up there.
So talk to us a little bit more about that, where you were sitting and what exactly you saw post-match.
Yeah, we were with a few of the New Zealand cricket staff and some of the families. Trent Bolt's brother Jono was leading the charge with the chanting, and there was a really good atmosphere, and Gary Stead's parents. So look, everyone was, I think, with 5 overs to go, pretty confident. We'd done a really good job, but with cricket anything can happen, and yeah, no one could have picked any of that. I think the 4 off Ben Stokes' bat was really unfortunate, but to still get a tie and tie the game twice, it's not really fair. There's a winner, but that's cricket.
And Minister of Sport Grant Robertson says the loss doesn't take away the impact of what making today's final will have on cricket in New Zealand.
This will do wonders for people's interest in cricket. The whole country stopped for it, didn't it? And yeah, look, we've got a big summer of cricket coming up. We've got the Boxing Day Test, which is just going to be incredible. There's some really amazing opportunities there. We've got the Women's Cricket World Cup in 2021. Cricket's a game for all New Zealanders. People love it, and this has just been another occasion for us to celebrate that, and yeah, just be really proud.
In England, though, a World Cup trophy sparks a new generation of future hopefuls.
It was amazing.
Do you play cricket yourself?
Yeah.
And is this going to be you one day at a World Cup?
Maybe, I don't know yet.
How did you feel when you saw the team holding up the trophy?
I was just overwhelmed. It was such, it was the first time we've won it, and to be there to watch it was amazing.
So there you have it. England are the 2019 Cricket World Cup champions. New Zealand can hold their heads up high, though, knowing they were a part of one of the greatest cricket games of all time. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, kuravinda huni a tēnei.
And they may not have won, but plans are already underway for a celebration when the Black Caps return from the World Cup. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff says he's received a call from the Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, this morning to discuss ways to best honour the team's efforts.
We were both of the same mind. We both stayed up over the night and watched much of the cricket, and we thought, what can we do to honour that team when it comes home? And the Prime Minister's suggestion was maybe we could do something in Auckland on the day they arrive back later this week. So we're now in conversation with New Zealand Cricket and the Black Caps to see what they would like to have. But we really would like to honour them, not only for their superb skills, but also for their sportsmanship and the graciousness with which they accepted that loss, even though I don't accept the loss. They are the top equal team in the world cricket.
And it is almost 17 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A court's been told a Ngaruawahia man died at the hands of a pack of people who targeted him for what he'd supposedly said about a gang boss. 26-year-old Mitchell Patterson had succumbed to meth addiction and was supplying the drug when his body was found at McLaren Falls in the Bay of Plenty in July 2018. 3 people are on trial over his death in the High Court in Hamilton. Our reporter Andrew McRae has been in court.
Gang leader Leon Wilson and Christopher Smith face charges of manslaughter, kidnapping and conspiring to pervert the course of justice. Chloe Kerridge is accused of kidnapping and trying to defeat justice. Crown Prosecutor Jacinta Foster says a petty and puerile response to rumour and innuendo drove the targeting of Mr Patterson. She told the jury that Leon Wilson, who's president of the Nomads gang in Hamilton, ordered others to bring Mr Patterson to him. Mr Patterson was enticed into a car and held down by one man.
Mr Patterson began struggling in an attempt to escape the vehicle. During that struggle, Mr Walker restrained Mr Patterson in a headlock or chokehold, placing an arm around his neck.
Ms Foster says Mr Patterson was taken from a central Hamilton address to Leon Wilson's home in the suburb of Flagstaff.
Mr Patterson was observed to be blue in the face and unresponsive. He had a small amount of blood visible on his lips. Attempts were made by various people at the Pahutakawa address to rouse him or to wake him, but they were unsuccessful. The group then discussed throwing cold water on him or attempting to revive him, but eventually they realised he was dead.
The Crown says a plan was then hatched to dispose of the body.
Removed Mr Patterson's body from the rear of the Nissan Terrano and threw it over the bridge railing into the water below.
The Crown accepts that there was never an intention to kill Mr Patterson.
The Crown says that Mr Smith and Mr Wilson, by reason of their actions and their involvement in the early hours of the 12th of July, are parties to the assault. And as parties to the assault, they are parties to the manslaughter.
After the Crown finished its opening, lawyer for Leon Wilson, Roger Laybourne, made a brief opening statement to the jury.
He never intended to have any violence that could possibly lead to serious injury or death. The sad reality is you can't talk to a person who's brought to you deceased.
The Crown intends to call 40 witnesses in a trial expected to last up to 2 weeks. 5 other people have already pleaded guilty for their part in Mr Patterson's death. In Hamilton, the checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tiene.
This week marks the 50th anniversary of the moon landings. As part of the Apollo 11 mission, astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first man to step foot on the moon. When he returned, he retreated from the spotlight and the public knew very little about him. The BBC's Palab Ghosh spoke to his sons and granddaughter to find out a bit more.
The prime crew now departing from their crew quarters.
On his way to the launch pad, he was about to become the most famous person in human history. Yet since he set foot on the moon, the world learnt little about the real Neil Armstrong.
Here they're in the suit-up room.
You really do look a lot like him, Dad.
Thanks.
His son Mark was just 6 years old at the time.
Photo of...
Oh, Dad.
Little baby.
Cute as a button.
50 years on and a world away, he relives those moments with his daughter Kaylee.
Lights on, forward.
Basically, Dad's controlling the vehicle and Buzz is calling off how far down they go and how much fuel is left.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Good job, Grandpa.
He did not appear to be worried, and so we weren't worried. Okay, everything's going to be fine, and we'll see Dad in a month or so when he's out of quarantine. Dad was very much the same after as he was before, and both he and my mother wanted our lives to try to stay the same after as before. And that was a struggle.
Yeah, they've been doing it for such a long time. His eldest brother, Rick, told me that it wasn't always easy being Neil Armstrong's son.
Everybody wants to be judged on their own merits, I think. I think I would have liked to have been an astronaut in the shuttle program, and maybe I didn't because I didn't want to have to face down that comparison.
At the time of the moon landing, through his eyes, millions across the world saw what he saw.
In 1969, he was looking back at the Earth and seeing it as a fragile resource. I wasn't alive, of course, for it, and so getting to relive it in my own generation is really, really special.
It's very pretty out here.
And Palab Ghosh with that report. A cactus of epic proportions has pricked the interest of buyers from all over the world. Christchurch business owner Johnny Small is the custodian of what was a 3-metre-high San Pedro cactus. The owners, whose property it was planted on 30 years ago, want to sell up. They also gave Johnny the green light to sell the cactus, with pieces ranging from $15 to hundreds of dollars. Those cactus chunks are now stacked up waiting for buyers. But a post on a Christchurch Facebook group offering the plant for sale has sprouted into a viral sensation. Our reporter Logan Church and videographer Simon Rogers went out to meet Johnny and what remains of the cactus at an undisclosed location in Christchurch.
So to start off with, Johnny, can you tell me the story of this giant cactus you've had?
Well, I'm not actually the owner of the cactus. It's owned by a friend of mine who I've been doing work at his place over several years. He planted this cactus from a root base over 30 years ago, and then it's just gone nuts from there. Unfortunately, he's had to sell the property, so and he didn't want it to go into waste, so then we've cut it down and taken a whole lot of cuttings and stuff like that. So yeah, that's the reason why it's up for grabs now for cactus enthusiasts to get a piece off, you know.
For our listeners, can you describe what it looks like at its height?
She was 7 metres tall the last time it was measured. It would probably be close to 2.5 to 3 metres wide. And about 1,200 deep, with many different pups and laterals coming off it. Like I say, some of them were up to 7 metres tall, so she was a ginormous plant, you know, and 30 years old. And I believe it possibly could have been one of the biggest ones in New Zealand, just from some of the information we've been given by the Cactus Society group. So yeah.
And you have an interest in cactus growing yourself? Cacti growing?
Yeah, I have actually. I've always liked the cactus and that, and since I've had the opportunity to cut this down, and then I've come across my prized piece, which.
What makes this prized?
It's the deformalities on this thing. As you can tell, it's not just straightforward like a lot of these other cactus that I've got down here. All the different ribs and sections in this thing as well. You know, it's very, very well sought after, but unfortunately, it's not for sale. This is my baby that I'll be potting and keeping for many years to come. So.
Completely. So what's the process from now? You've obviously cut a lot of this into very small pieces. How many pieces have you got?
Oh, I haven't got anywhere near close to finishing it yet, obviously. I've got to go through and cut the ends off. These parts here are just called tips. So as you can tell, they've got sulphur and lime on the end of them, which will then dry out the cactus, turns it into a callus, and that's after it does that, that's when you have the opportunity to reroot the plant and plant it, and off she'll go.
Wow. Yeah, and you've obviously put it for sale now, some of the pieces. What interest have you had?
Oh, phenomenal. It's been unreal. I've had a lot of inquiries from overseas, especially, but a lot of that, obviously, we're going to have to check through MPI and also custom regulations to whether we can legally export this to other countries.
Whereabouts have you had interest from?
Spain, Mexico, Brazil, Dakota, Canada, Massachusetts, Milwaukee. The list goes on and on and on.
Pretty much anywhere you can name, you've had someone call.
Pretty much, yeah. I've even had a guy from Afghanistan get a hold of me, which I thought was a little bit strange, but yeah, he was actually very interested in my deformed piece and wanted to pay good money for it. But
which you're not giving up.
No, it's my baby. No. So I'm keeping
why would people buy a piece of a cactus?
It's the genetic thing. There's a massive following for cacti throughout New Zealand and obviously throughout the world. It grows off a cutting, obviously. It doesn't take very long as well. The interest in it, you can actually get a piece of my cactus and graft it onto another cactus as well, which then you create a hybrid, which might be a fast growing and different type of cactus as well. So yeah, it's been a very big learning curve for me as well, I suppose, with all the different information and that I've been given by a lot of the Cactus Society growers and that, and yeah, it's been really good and helpful. So, yeah.
If I wanted to buy a piece, how much would that set me back?
Depending on what piece you wanted, you can have a tip piece starts at about $15 per foot, right up to single pieces and roots, which I've got, which are over 225 mil wide and about a metre tall. You're looking at about $200 for that, but the roots are very well sought after because they're the ones that actually grow the pups and actually regenerate the plant, obviously. You know, so yeah.
And how much would you sell that one to me for?
I wouldn't. Yeah, it's not even worth
Nothing?
it, mate. Yeah, no, I'd keep this one. Yeah. I do have another one like it, which I'd like $200 for, but we'll see how we go.
And that's Cactus owner Johnny Small speaking to our reporter Logan Church. If you were listening to that on the drive home, you can go online and see the pictures of this cactus. Some of the offcuts, really, he was showing there are absolute whoppers. We will put that up on our webpage and our Facebook page. Just time for some of your feedback before we go. Barry, who got in contact earlier in the program about John Banks thinking about taking another tilt at the mayoralty. Barry says that we should stop people standing for office at 65, I think it was, once you're collecting the super. Barry's got back in touch again and says, about my ageist ? Text, I'm not too far off being able to collect New Zealand super. Perhaps a cull of Parliament would not be a bad thing. Exception to the no pensioner policy, says Barry. I would vote for David Attenborough if he was to run for mayor. Have a nice evening. Hey, thanks, Barry, for that. I did a quick search to see who would be, well, get the boot out of Parliament in the mayoralties. Just a quick roundup. David Carter, Phil Goff, Winston Peters, Trevor Mallard and Tolly and Tim Shadbolt, just for starters, would be out under your criteria, Barry. Winnie, though, has got in contact to basically agree with Barry, saying, could we please have contenders who are not elderly/middle-aged men who have been MPs or men who have stood for the position unsuccessfully a few times before. Just some new blood would be great to make this race exciting and therefore encourage Aucklanders to vote, says Winnie. Surely there are some clever, creative, inspiring younger people out there who would be capable of doing an amazing job. Wellington has one, as do other cities in Aotearoa. Hey, I'm getting some news to hand here, actually. An update on an earlier story we did about 3 rogue penguins that apparently took up residence under a sushi shop in the Wellington train station. Now, Doc was on the program a little earlier, said the police had rescued said penguins and returned them to a safe place. But we are getting reports of a sighting of another penguin. Oh, and if you are watching, we have managed to get a picture of this penguin. So do go on our Facebook page and we'll stick it up on the website. Little cute penguin snuffling around. That looks like a freezer or something near the Wellington train station. Apparently the draw of the sushi shop there is strong. We don't know if this is a returning penguin or a different penguin who was left behind. We'll try and get to the bottom of it. Keep listening to the bulletins and check out our stories online. Thanks for joining us. That's it for this evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Black Caps captain Kane Williamson says the overthrow rule should not change after a deflection off England batsman Ben Stokes' bat led to 6 runs in the final over of the Cricket World Cup. The Crown says a man whose body was found at McLaren Falls in Bay of Plenty died after being held in a chokehold. A man is banned from owning pets and must pay $2,000 to the SPCA after throwing a dog against a wall last year. And the 2 little blue penguins relocated from under a sushi bar at Wellington Railway Station have returned to their nest site there. Those are the headlines. Our next news at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
We've talked to the Minister of Health and we've been very disappointed at the government's response. Consumption of sugary drinks is actually increasing in New Zealand.
Live with local, national and international stories and some music with your news.
I thought you might like this one, Karen. I was thinking of you when I